What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. It's Lido, and today we're gonna react to how Roger Federer works. A podcast by Founders Podcast, and this podcast is by David Senra. So David Senra is a podcaster slash researcher that not follows but studies all the greatest minds, all the people that are obsessed with greatness, whether they're founders, athletes, or whatever they did or do in life. He studies them and he goes in depth into their life, their philosophy, their way of working, their way of thinking, their way of doing things, their way of interacting with the world and others. And it's basically someone that is obsessed with obsessions and obsessed with people with obsessions. So it's really a great way to learn from the greatest minds from the perspective of a great mind. So today I'm going to react to this video called How Roger Federer Works.
I spent years whining, swearing, and throwing my racket before I learned how to keep my cool. My wake-up call came early in my career when an opponent publicly questioned my mental discipline. He said Roger will be the favorite for the first 2 hours, and I'll be the favorite after that. I realized what he was saying. Everybody can play well in the first 2 hours. You're fit, you're fast, you're clear. After 2 hours, your legs get wobbly, your mind starts wandering, and your discipline starts to fade. It made me realize I had so much more work ahead of me. My parents, my coaches, everyone had been calling me out, and now my rivals were doing it. I am eternally grateful for what he did because it made me work harder and train harder, a lot harder. That was an excerpt not from the book that I'm going to talk to you about today, but actually from Roger Federer's commencement address that he gave at Dartmouth after he retired. And before I get into this incredible book that
So right off the bat, you can see how Roger Federer was able to take feedback from his opposition instead of just seeing at opposition and closing himself off from that remark. He was able to take it in and improve on that. And I feel like this is what people call having like a growth mindset, but like a complete growth mindset. Because a lot of time when it comes from people that you go against, we tend to close ourselves off. But instead, he just took it in, and because he truly wants to be to get better by any means, and he knows there's no limit to the sources that feedback can come from.
I read about Roger Federer, which is called The Master, The Long Run and the Beautiful Game of Roger Federer, written by Christopher Clarey. I want to pull out a few quotes from Federer's excellent commencement address. And so Federer had three main ideas that he shared in the commencement address. Number one, effortlessness is a myth. Number two, it's only a point. And number three, life is bigger than the court. I want to jump to point number two. This is my favorite part of the entire.
Okay, so the first point was effortlessness is a myth. He said it's a point and life is bigger than the court. So before he goes more into depth, I'm going to try to analyze it myself. So he said effortlessness is a myth. So how I would interpret it just from that is effortlessness is a myth because you got to see it from the bigger picture. If you chop it in all the small moments of you working, yes, you're working hard and you put it in pain, but then you stacking up the pain and the hard work is gonna make it seem effortless because you're gonna get better and better and better and better. And maybe that's when they call it a point. And the point is when you finally see the bigger picture, and then you get momentum. When you get the momentum, you're able to see the bigger picture. But that doesn't mean you're gonna stop. It just means that you consistently put in work to the point that it became the discipline became routine, and now we can keep going and keep improving, and it's gonna seem effortless. And the third point is he said life is bigger than the court. I guess it's a balance of things, so you don't get overwhelmed, like and burn out. Because if you go like if you just go like, oh, your life is the court, then when you're off the court, you're gonna feel disoriented, or like you're not gonna feel like yourself, or you're not gonna be well mentally. But then it's gonna affect you when you go back in the court. But I'm trying to see this also from a bigger perspective than tennis or sports. Just from a life perspective. It's just anything that we put in work in, anything that we want to be great at. Yes, we gotta have a focus on constantly like wanting to improve in that aspect. But at the same time, it cannot consume us completely to the point where like when we're not work focused on that it's getting like it's diminishing everything else. That's how I interpret it.
Commencement
You want to
address.
keep going?
He says, perfection is impossible. It is only a point. In the 1,526 single matches I played in my career, I won almost 80% of those matches. Now I have a question for you. What percentage of points do you think I won in those matches? Only 54%. In other words, even top ranked
50. He won 80% of his uh 1,500 matches, but he only how much? I think he only won by 54. He had like 54% of the points. Hold up. Let's go back. And
matches.
so he said
Only 54 for you. What percentage of points do you think I won in those matches? Only 54%.
so he won 80% of his over 1,000 matches, but the percentage of points that he had in these matches was 54%. So really, he won every matches by only 4%. So it shows like just the little details. It's like the little difference over time is gonna make the difference in his win-loss ratio. But in every game, it's always the little details that's gonna change, like that's gonna make the win or lose difference. And it's also like it reminds me of like even in basketball, like if you go look at the greatest basketball players of all time, whether it's LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry. If you look at his shooting percentage, even Steph Curry, let's take Steph Curry for example. Steph Curry is the greatest 3-point shooter of all time, and like nowadays there's no question about it. But if we go look at his shooting percentage, Steph Curry is shooting below 50%. He's shooting I think around like 46%, 47% from 3-point line, which means Steph Curry, the greatest 3-point shooter, misses more than he makes. This is a little bit different than this point, but it just shows that like it's always about the bigger picture, and focusing on the details and keep going.
In other words, even top ranked tennis players win barely more than half of the points they play. When you lose every second point on average, you learn not to dwell on every shot. You teach yourself to say, okay, I double faulted. It's only a point.
So actually it goes back to the point where like you don't dwell on every point you play. Cause let's go back to the Steph Curry example. Like he knows he's gonna miss more shots than he takes. So if he miss one shot, he's not gonna dwell on that shot. He's gonna be just ready for the next shot. He's gonna be like, cause he knows like that's how things goes. And at a certain level, you don't have time to dwell on a shot, and just gotta keep shooting it. It's only the little difference gonna make you win or lose. It's right now on the screen you can see it says it's only a point.
Okay, I came to the net and I got passed again. It's only a point. Even a great shot, an overhead backhand smash that ends up on a top 10 playlist, that too is just a point. Here is why I'm telling you this. When you are playing a point, it has to be the most important thing in the world.
So he's saying that even if you got a smash in your top 10 moment ESPN and the clip is everywhere, Federer thinks in his head, okay, it's only a point. I think that this is really like a stoic way of seeing things, because he knows that like at the end of the day, even the bigger picture, the win or lose, it's really a steady line, slightly going up if you're consistent and you're focused. It's a steady line. So he's not gonna get too high if he, has a great moment, but he's also not gonna get too low. He said it's only a point, and this makes him able to like stay in the present moment. So let's get back to it.
And it is. But when it's behind you, it's behind you. This mindset is really crucial because it frees you to fully commit to the next point and the next point after that with intensity, clarity, and focus. The truth is, whatever game you play in life, sometimes you're going to lose a point, a match, a season, a job. It is a roller coaster with many ups and downs, and it's natural when you're down to doubt yourself and to feel sorry for yourself. And by the way, your opponents have self-doubt too. Don't ever forget that.
That's really powerful, because he just said even your opponent has self-doubt too. This means that if you want an edge over the competition, if you can control these self-doubts and have less self-doubt than your opponent, or even not even have less self-doubt than them, but like able to control them better, this means that like you have one more leverage than your competition doesn't have. And like we seen before, he only won by he won 54% of the points in the match, so he only won by 4%. This means that in all the battles that is inside the arena, he won by 4%. There's only like 4% of things that he has done better, which led him to win the match. And maybe these 4% is having better self-control of your self-doubt. This is really a mental thing.
But negative energy is wasted energy. You want to become a master at overcoming hard moments. That is, to me, the sign of a champion. The best in the world are not the best in the world because energy. You want to become a master at overcoming hard moments. That is, to me, the sign of a champion.
Becoming master at overcoming hard moments is a sign of becoming champion. I guess it only comes with embracing these hard moments and going at them and being fully present in them to really take it all in, even when it's hard, so that when they come again, you can handle this experience better, and then seek more of them, so then you can develop a mastery of handling hard moments. So like we always know, like hardships makes you stronger, like we know that. But if you're really gonna seek greatness, that means you're gonna seek hard moments, and you really gonna go after them, because you want repetition in them, because repetition is gonna build up that mastery. It's a little bit of a crazy mindset, because people like want to live like comfortable, good life and everything, but if you want to be great doesn't necessarily equals to comfortable.
The best in the world are not the best in the world because they win every point. It's because they know they'll lose again and again and again and have learned how to deal with it. You accept it, cry it out if you need to, and then force a smile. You move on, be relentless, adapt, and grow. And then these are the few sentences that really jumped out at me from his third point, which is
I like a lot when he said you move out and grow. And I think having that short-term memory is also important. Like being able to move on, and within a day is gonna happen a lot. Like we all know that one person that like, oh like this ruined something happened, and they say like, oh, this really ruined my day. And it's crazy how like whatever it is, I understand. Like some things are more important to us, and then it's gonna affect us, but it's gonna say it's gonna ruin your day. But what someone with a mindset like this is gonna think is they're gonna move on, they're gonna stay in the present moment, and they're gonna work so that they can win the next moment in the day, and the next moment that comes, and the next moment that comes, the next moment that comes, because they don't want to admit defeat. They don't want to admit defeat at that one point. They know that like it's a long game, and they can still win the day and make the day good, whatever point it is.
Life is bigger than the court. Even when I was just starting out, I knew that tennis could show me the world, but tennis could never be the world. I knew that if I was lucky, maybe I could play competitively.
I think that's the third point that they're talking about, where they say, like life is bigger than the court.
Until my late 30s, maybe even till I was 41. But even when I was in the top 5, it was important to me to have a life, a rewarding life full of travel, culture, friendships, and family. These are the reasons that I never burned out. And never burning out is one of the most important stories.
This is really surprising to me because, like, I grew up like playing basketball, and being a basketball fan, just having love for the game of basketball, and a lot of people, including myself, I was looking up to, and I still look up to like people like Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and even more than that. But I'm gonna stick to these three for now, because these three, especially Kobe Bryant, were known for like going all in into their craft, and shutting everything else out. If Kobe, his schedule was crazy. Like at some point he would barely sleep, be at the gym at 4, and then had another workout at 12, then have practice. Be in the gym at 4 by himself, then have practice, and then go back to the gym by himself, and then go back at night, and then he would just have a insane schedule where it was only strictly basketball, and almost nothing else, because he knew that if he had more time practicing than anyone else, then he would surely become better than everybody else. But Federer, he thinks about it a different way. He handles what he has to on the court, on the tennis court, and then for him, what's outside the tennis court is as important for him. Like you said, like his fun time, his time with the family, and everything, like just putting his mind off the court is also as much important as the time he puts in on the court.
From Roger Federer's career and from this book. I love the subtitle, The Long Run and Beautiful Game of Roger Federer. And the reason I wanted to start with those 3 ideas from his commencement address is because as I went over and over again and reread my highlights and my notes before I sat down to talk to you, I realized what was most interesting to me was not the biographical account of Roger Federer's life and career. What was most interesting to me was the ideas that helped him have this long run and beautiful game. So what I did is I stripped everything away except the ideas that contributed to his top performance and his durable and long-lasting career.
And this is why I really like David Senra's podcast, because he goes into depth into like lots of book. Like a lot of time when he goes over a founder, he reads like maybe like if there's only one book, it's gonna be one book. But the more there's books, it could be 3 books, it could be 4 books. He's gonna read all 4 of them. And not only once, but multiple times, and also with different approach to reading it, like different angles, like seeking different type of information, different type of knowledge, different angles within the head of the founder in that is described in the book. And I really appreciate the work he's putting in for everybody and sharing this on YouTube with everyone. I really appreciate that from him.
And so you'll see some of these ideas just reappear over and over again throughout the decades of his life and his career. I want to go back to what he just said at the beginning of the commencement address, and it is tied to the fact that he seeks immediate feedback. And then something that his coaches and people around him notice for his entire career is how fast, how quickly he is able to apply the things that he learns. And so he talks about the benefit of the fact that his occupation, his career, his mission, his dream had to be played out in front of a live audience. And there's a benefit to that immediate feedback loop. And this is what he said: playing in front of a live audience, you get the review right away. You know if you're good or bad. It's like a musician. And I'll tell you, it's a good feeling to have. Even if you're bad, it doesn't matter. All you have to do is then go work at it. At least you know you have some work to do. And if you're great, it gives you confidence and motivation and inspires you. And I think that ties.
The fact that Federer is able to take feedback from, basically everything, from his opponent, from the crowd, and, from his team and from his mind as well. Everything. He's going to take feedback for everything. Only one thing I'm kind of curious about is because when you take feedback from the crowd, a lot of time they don't have the same expertise that you have. Like you can see it a lot of times if you go to tennis is different because the crowd is kind of more like silent and respectful because they have like a certain etiquette. You can't just scream all game during a tennis game, like you're gonna get kicked out. But if you go to a basketball game or a soccer game, a lot of times you have like hecklers and they're gonna scream nonsense, and even to the greatest players gonna say like, oh, it's two Hall of Famers. You can see it with Russell Westbrook, one of the greatest point guard of all time, and he gets disrespected like maybe almost every game by fans and everything. So Russell Westbrook is definitely one of the greatest point guards of all time, but there's still gonna be people that's gonna disrespect him. So him taking feedback from the crowd wouldn't be the same as Federer because it's like two different environments. But I guess in Federer's environment it's different because in tennis, like there's really a severe etiquette from the crowd.
This idea that you and I talk about over and over again, that all of history's greatest entrepreneurs, they constantly preach the value of being close to the customer, of getting immediate feedback from your customer and from the people that work for you that are actually servicing the customers. This is all tied to this idea that Federer, throughout his entire career, they talk about, look how effortless it is. And he actually took, partial offense to that. It made it seem like it was completely natural, that he didn't have to work hard to make it look effortless. And so that's something that reappears over and over again in the book. It says Federer was widely perceived as a natural, and yet he became a meticulous planner who learned to embrace routine and self-discipline, plotting out his schedule well in advance and in considerable detail. Though it was rare to see Federer sweat, there was tremendous toil and ample self-doubt behind the scenes. And that leads us to another idea that helps him make it look effortless. And the way I think about this is this maxim from Charlie Munger, that your job as an entrepreneur is to build a seamless web of deserved trust. So much of this book is about the people that helped Federer on his journey, the team that he built, the people that he surrounded himself with. If you listen to last week's episode about Andre Agassi and that fantastic autobiography, it was the exact same thing for.
Before we keep going, I think this is something like how he's talking about like everything was meticulously planned. I think this is something I gotta work on more. And I think it's gonna come from, in my personal situation, from like waking up earlier in the morning and having like sessions where I plan it in my journal, because sometimes I underestimate how important it is to do so, because this way my mind is really more organized, and when I actually go and do these stuff, it's gonna help me stay focused because I already know what I'm doing right now, and then I can build on top of that.
Agassi's life. Agassi, just like Federer, repeat over and over again, I would not have had the success I had if it wasn't for the people that were around me. And Federer picked really carefully. He says, fortune indeed played a role for Federer. He might not have become a champion, at least not a tennis champion, if an Australian journeyman pro named Peter Carter had not decided to take a coaching job in a small club in Basel, Switzerland. Federer might not have had the staying power if he had not met a cerebral, sensitive, and gifted fitness trainer named Pierre Paganini, or crossed paths with Mirka Vevernek. God bless these last names. There's no way. I'm sorry. There's no ways I'm pronouncing it correctly. An older Swiss player who eventually became his part-time press agent, organizer, and most importantly, his wife. And one thing that his coaches, his fitness trainers, the people around him would constantly remark on is that Federer wanted to see how far he could take it. He believed that stagnation is regression. I absolutely love this part. It says he did stop school at 16 and was not a particularly serious student, but he approached adulthood and the tour with much more rigor. He had both an abiding love of the game and the drive to demand more of himself. He believed that maintaining the same level in pro tennis was actually losing ground. This is something he's going to have in common, this belief, with one of his rivals, which is Novak Djokovic. This is what Novak Djokovic said. The number one requirement to succeed at...
I really agree with that take because even if you reach one of the even if you reach the top spot, if you're the greatest in something and all you do is maintain that top spot, like humans and just things in general always evolve and innovate and surpass. So if you're just maintaining, even if you reach a certain level, on the long run you're gonna lose because someone else or something else is gonna come and surpass you. But if you're always trying to reach new heights, then it's a different story. Because if you're already on top and you're not just trying to maintain and climbing, then the person or the thing that's gonna try to catch up with you is always gonna have some work to do to catch up, and there won't be a point where they surpass you unless you let them.
This level is the constant desire and open-mindedness to master and improve and evolve yourself in every aspect. I know Roger has talked about this a lot, and I think it's something most top athletes in all sports can agree on. Stagnation is regression. And so something that Novak and Federer and Agassi all had in common is they wanted to be the best. From a very young age, they talked about they're 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old. They would say, I'm going to be the number one tennis player in the world. And I think that's one of the benefits about reading this book and reading Agassi's book.
And it's really, when they say stagnation is like regression, it's really about being relentless. Like, it doesn't, that's why he said at the beginning, like, it doesn't matter if I have like a top 10 play, like my clips is everywhere, the fame and everything. He's always going to push to reach greater heights. And you have to, no matter how great, no matter where you came from and how far you made it, you have to keep going. And it's also a blessing because our time on earth is limited. So we'll have plenty of time after to rest and stagnate and everything. So why not use our moment? Why not use our energy that we have in our life to just keep going up? But how he's doing it also is he's keeping the balance, because he's still gonna strive to go up on the court, but he's not gonna sacrifice everything else in his life where the court is everything. He's gonna sacrifice in terms of discipline, consistency, but he's gonna apply that same discipline and consistency outside of the court, which is, I think, is really beautiful way of living life, because you just want to be great all around aspect without leaving no sphere of improvement.
You realize how much work it takes to go from 10 or 15 or 20 to number one. Andy Roddick, a fellow tennis player, was talking about, it was very obvious when, I think Federer turns pro somewhere around 16, 17 years old. It was obvious he had talent. But what was not obvious is what was ahead of him for the next 24 years of his career. So that's what Andy Roddick said. I think it had progressed past the point of, is this guy going to be really good? I think that was a given. The question was, is he going to be Roger, or is he going to be Richard Gasquet, who is someone who is really, really good? I think people are lying to you if they say they can tell the difference at that stage, because the difference is inward. It is so important. I think maybe the most important thing about reading about these tennis players, and it's the same for founders, is how much of success comes down to what's going on in your mind. Back to this quote from Andy Roddick. I think it was a given that Roger was going to be a top 10 guy, a top 5 guy. But there's
Why I notice in a lot of like individual sports, they talk about a lot. They talk a lot about the mental aspect of the game. Like it's also present in the team sports, but I feel like it's always heavier in the individual sports, which is interesting.
a big difference between that and someone who is number one, who wins a slam and is a relevant result maker for 10 years. I had the accidental good luck of actually having dinner, I think it was probably like 2 years ago, with a mental coach of some of the top tennis players in the world. This is not a coach that has anything to do with the aspect of your game, like the physical aspect of your game. He focuses solely on the inner game of tennis, what is going on in your mind. And he said something that blew my mind, that he said that the gap between the number 4 player in the world and the number 3 player in the world is massive. That the 200th ranked player in the world is closer to number 4 than 4 is to number 3. And he said the main driver of that was their mental discipline. Before we get back into
I feel like this is really a heavy point. So he's saying from the gap between number 4 and number 3 is greater than the gap from number 200 to number 4. And he said the main factor is mental discipline. And this really means that, like, through something which is accessible to everyone, like everyone has a mind, you can get ahead of most of the competition. And that's really powerful. And this power is really inside of everyone. You gotta harness it, you gotta practice it, but it's there inside of you, inside of me, and inside of everyone else. But then it's really the choices that you make with your mind that's gonna differentiate you from everybody and everything else. It's really interesting and powerful.
to this, I want to tell you about the presenting sponsor of this podcast, Ramp, and I think there's a lesson in here that's applicable to anyone who's trying to make something great in the world. The founders of Ramp know, just like Steve Jobs knew, that you always bet on talent. The founders of Ramp want to bet on talent in everything that their company does. To Steve Jobs, this was mandatory. Steve Jobs said you must find extraordinary people, that a small team of A players can run circles around a giant team of B and C players. And so you must build a team that pursues the A players. That is exactly what Ramp has done. There's a reason that Ramp is the presenting sponsor of this podcast. They are chasing excellence. Like Roger Federer, they are only interested in being the best. Ramp has the most talented technical team in their industry. Becoming an engineer at Ramp is nearly impossible. Last year, Ramp hired only 0.23% of the people that applied. That means when you use Ramp, you now have top-tier technical talent and some of the best AI engineers working on your behalf 24/7 to automate and improve all of your business's financial operations, and they do this on a single platform. Ramp gives your business fully programmable corporate credit cards for your entire team, automated expense reporting, bill payments, accounting, and more, all in one place. The longer you use Ramp, the more efficient your company becomes. This is important because, as Sam Walton said in his autobiography, you can make a lot of different mistakes and still recover if you run an efficient operation, or you can be brilliant and still go out of business if you're too inefficient. Ramp helps you run an efficient organization. I run my business on Ramp, and so do most of the other top founders and CEOs I know. Make history's greatest entrepreneurs proud by going to ramp.com to learn how they can help your business save both time and money today. That is ramp.com. Now, when I got to
I know this is like a sponsored by David Senra. Like Ramp is sponsoring David Senra Founders Podcast. But I was actually doing some research on Ramp because I watched David Senra podcast and also his new interview show a lot, and Ramp is a recurring sponsor. So I did my research, and I actually like Ramp is really is interesting business in fintech, and I was doing my research, and the way they conduct their company, it's really like a mirror of like the greatest founders that are studied by David Senra. and even the points that he showed David by presenting ramp. When I was doing my research, I would see it in their website. I would see it in like their success. I would see it in their hiring process and everything, and it's really it's inspiring to see companies like that, because if you go into the job market right now, it's not it's not great. It's not great. There's a lot of successful companies in terms of like the money they're making and everything, but in terms of like the greatness they really want to achieve, and how they really like managing their business, and how things are going within, it's not great in general. But ramp seems different. I haven't been inside the environment. It's only from the research I've done, so maybe I'm wrong, but from what I've seen, it looks like they're one of their most relentless company right now, and they're gonna keep doing great things.
This next section of the book, this is when I realized what the most fascinating thing to me about Roger Federer, about reading this book, was how much he changed from the 16 or 17-year-old player over the next 2 decades. The parallel to Steve Jobs jumped off the page for me. So let me read this to you. There was a second realization. We all watched him, and it looked like he was not sweating. It looked like his heart rate was 30. It didn't look like anything was affecting him. Like it was clear that there was not going to be any bad decisions because it's break point and he is nervous because the crowd is a little into it or something. What we were unaware of was how far Federer had come in the behavior department from the racket chucking, self-berating episodes of his youth. It just looked like this is what he was ready for, and he could handle whatever situation came up. Go back to what Federer was saying, that his wake-up call came early in his career when he was talking the commencement address. That was not the case. His opponents called him mentally weak, that he had no mental discipline, that I can wear this guy out and take advantage of him and beat him. And there's example after example in the book, and as I'm reading this, I'm like, this is just like Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs, Roger Federer learned how to have more self-control with age. There is like a 20-page afterword that I highly recommend you read. It's in Ed Catmull's autobiography.
And after they went to the part where they were talking about the gap between number 4 and number 3, that is bigger than number 200 to number 4, it made me think like, so how can I have like a mental edge over the competition? Then I'm really realizing it's really in every choices that I make in a day, and then not even in a day, but in the moment, and then the next moment, but really by being in the moment that I can stack them up. So it's really about the long run, but winning in the long run by winning the present moment.
Called Creativity Inc. It's called The Steve Jobs We Knew. And Ed was partnered with Steve Jobs for more consecutive years than anybody else. And so I asked my personal AI assistant, which is trained on all my notes and highlights and transcripts, I go, how did Ed Catmull describe how Steve Jobs changed over the 20-year partnership? And there's a few things I want to read to you. Ed's point was that Steve Jobs changed profoundly over the 2 decades they worked together, so much so that the popular one-note caricature of Jobs as a relentless perfectionist and an emotional tone-deaf bully misses the real story. Catmull watched him evolve in real time. Catmull said early on, Jobs could be dismissive, that he could create ill will, that he would overreach in negotiations. But Catmull emphasized that Jobs learned from the backfires and explicitly told Catmull that he learned from his mistakes. And over time, Steve became fairer and wiser, and his understanding of partnership deepened, not in a way that diluted his innovation standards, but in a way that strengthened them. And if the only thing you take away from Roger Federer's life is that, his ability to learn how to control his emotions, he would have not had the long run and the beautiful game if he never developed that skill. And I think there's 2 things that helped him do this and succeed in other areas of his career. And this is this idea where, most sophisticated entrepreneurs, belief comes before ability. They have excessive self-confidence, even before other people think they deserve to have that confidence, and they're obsessed with control. So a lot of these European...
I like how he said even before people think they deserve that confidence. And when you're confident with yourself, a lot of time, a lot of people, they're not gonna like it, which is weird because it really has nothing to do with them. It's really how you feel about yourself. So, but when you understand that, it really doesn't, yes, it affects you, but you know how to deal with it because you're confident with yourself. I just think it's a weird phenomena, but you understand it. It's just like your self confidence is bothering them within themselves, because some of them is they want that self confidence for themselves, but they still have some things to deal with, and they see it in you. So maybe they get jealous, maybe they get mad, maybe they're dealing with some things within themselves, but instead of looking at their problem within themselves, they project on others, or they look at others' problem into others. And it's always easier to look at others and point fingers and find something, but as humans, then it's harder to look within themselves and admit to yourself that, like, okay, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that, I'm dealing with this. That's why he said right before, like, controlling your emotions is really a powerful edge, because when this happens and you're able to control it, then you can move to the next thing. It's never gonna be effortless. Like they said before, it's never gonna be effortless, but at least you can move to something else once you've worked hard to deal with something. Like in another podcast, one of the great founders said, it's in the David Center podcast still, but one of the great founders said, the reward for good work is more work. And it's the same thing with working with your emotions. You're gonna deal with one emotion, and then something else is gonna come up. But then it's a privilege that you were able to deal with one emotion and then deal with the next one, because then after that you can build up and work on the next one and keep improving yourself and bettering your quality of life, which is a blessing, a privilege.
I've been reading a lot about European tennis players. A lot of them in their youth, they're like, oh, I like tennis. Maybe I could play soccer too. But they're usually control freaks. And so there's this example of him picking an individual sport on purpose. There was something in him that wanted full ownership, a strain of perfectionism that made him realize he would have struggled to accept other shortcomings when he already had so much difficulty accepting his own. And then, just like Novak Djokovic, just like Andre Agassi, Novak Djokovic would go around.
As a basketball player, I understand this from his perspective, because it's a different mindset. Like when you play a basketball, and let's say you're the best player on your team, like a lot of times you're gonna hear people say, like, he always take accountability even when it's like it's not their fault. And the best player, that's what they have to do. You have to take accountability even if it's not your fault. But then, like, it's different in individual sports, because it is your fault. Like, you gotta take accountability, because it is completely your fault. It's different. Even in a team sport, it is your fault, because you should know your personnel. You should know, it's okay if it's your fault. It's okay to do mistake. It's okay, like, to accept it. It's your fault. Partly your fault. That's how you're gonna improve. But sometimes it's not completely your fault, because you also have teammates that have responsibilities. But in individual sports, it is completely your fault, and you gotta accept it. And like there's in Federer position, they say he had a hard time accepting his own faults, so he couldn't play a team sport, because how can he accept someone else's faults when he can't even accept his? But then he developed his mental game and improved.
At 6 years old, when he was 6 years old, he said that he was going to be the number one tennis player in the world. For Roger Federer, at age 8, Roger was going around and telling his friends that he was going to be number one. And then I want to give you another example of something we've already talked about a few times. Roger has this ability to apply what he's learning rapidly. And he had this from a young age. So one of his
I'm kind of curious about this because, you know, like some people, like they're they openly like share their goals or their aspiration, like say I'm gonna be number one and everything, and you know it display that as confidence. But other people, you know, like they don't share, you know, their goals, and they just, you know, go about it and, you know, get it done it and do it. And that still is confidence. I feel like there's different way to display confidence, but this is like a Roger Federer video. So I guess this is the way he went about it. He's just confident to the point where like he would just share it to others, and yeah, he wouldn't care.
Youth coaches, when he was still a junior player, said he had never seen another player who could apply his advice so quickly. It was an observation that many coaches would make of Federer throughout the decades.
That's a great skill. That's a great skill, honestly. Be able to take feedback and apply it directly is a great skill. They say like someone that a fool is gonna do what the wise does at first. So someone's gonna get the feedback and not do it, and then okay, finally I'm gonna do it, and then understand that he should have been doing it before. It's kind of like a full mindset. But someone that's wise is gonna, you know, like get the advice, do it directly, and you know move on to the next thing they have to work on. So I guess he was wise at that point.
And so he's smart enough to build a team around him that hold him to high standards, and he also holds himself to high standards. This goes back into just how, by his own admission, that he had a weak mentality, that he had a lack of self-control. There was another undeniable weakness in those early years, Federer's mentality. I was a terrible loser. I really was, Federer said. Federer's self-control was lacking. This is what he says. I knew what I could do, and failure made me mad. I had two...
Also, this is powerful because he's not scared of his weaknesses. His weakness got exposed time and time and over, and he was willing to focus on that to get better. He didn't want to bury it. He didn't want to hide it. He didn't want to cope for it. He didn't want to, you know, pretend that it wasn't there. He wanted to face it head on and get better.
Two voices inside me, the devil and the angel. And one self couldn't believe how stupid the other one could be. He fixes this inner monologue, by the way. How could you miss that? One voice would say. Then I would just explode. My dad used to be so embarrassed at tournaments that he would shout at me from the side of the court, telling me to be quiet. And then on the way home in the car, he might drive for an hour and a half and not say a word. Federer's lack of mental discipline was the biggest reason he was not a can't-miss.
And yeah, this is something that I really try to watch for myself and even for the people around me. Like, I don't like talking down about myself. I used to because I didn't know how powerful my mind and, you know, my words were. And, you know, like I learned, and then I realized like I cannot do that to myself. And also I cannot let the people around me like do that to themselves as well. Because I know also I'm doing it for them, also protecting myself, because, you know, you are the people you're around. And if the people around you are always like saying negative thing about themselves, it's gonna affect you, because, you know, like I don't want to be what you project on your. I don't want to be the negative things you project on yourself. You know, like I want to be something positive. I want to keep improving, and then it's the same for my mind. You know, like sometimes you gotta observe your mind and, you know, understand like, okay, you know, observe the inner dialogue and understand like, okay, right now it's being negative. I don't want to be that negative narrative that is going on. So I'm gonna work towards shifting it towards something positive. It's the same with how you deal with your environment.
This prospect. He clearly had the talent and seemed to have the ambition, but the mental game is often what makes the difference between mediocre and good, and between good and great. And so as a teenager, he realizes, well, if I'm going around saying I'm going to be the best player in the world, I'm going to be number one, it's going to require exceptional talent and drive. a solid support structure, plenty of luck, and sound decisions. And you can't make sound decisions if you can't control your emotions. There's a line in the commencement address that he says that I think is really important. And he says, trusting yourself is a talent. And so when Federer was 14, he goes away to boarding school, and he considers this critical to his later success. It says when he gives advice to younger players, he often recommends that they take the opportunity to leave home for a stretch to build their sense of self-reliance. This is a key trait in a brutally competitive individual sport where trusting yourself can be every bit as important as trusting your forehand. None of this works if you can't trust your own judgment. And so it's going to come down to the talent and the skill and the play of Federer on the court. But he's also got to choose the people that's going to help him on his journey. And one of the best decisions he ever made was picking this esoteric and unusual fitness coach. This was not an obvious choice, and here's why. He was a much older man who never played tennis competitively, but who played a major role in Federer's long-running success, perhaps the decisive role. This is Pierre Paganini, who was Federer's fitness coach. Paganini was much more than a clever and hyper-fit taskmaster. He was Federer's sounding board, occasional spiritual guide, and the final word on scheduling. A subtle yet convincing lobbyist for the benefits of dedication and moderation. This is so important. Remember, we're going back to this idea of the long game. From the start, Paganini had a long-term view of Federer's health and path. The central message was that tough, consistent work was necessary, but so were rest and escape if Federer wanted to last in a sport whose repetitive rhythms and patterns can wear down a player. And he also focused.
This is amazing because like this is really like a contrast between like Federer and Kobe Bryant. I'm going back to Kobe because like I love Kobe Bryant. Like he really is an inspiration for me. But this like like I still gotta stay non-biased because everybody has their good and their bad, and in that
Focused on where rest and
that part,
escape.
you said the central message was that tough, consistent work was necessary, but so were rest and escape
If Federer wanted to last in a sport whose repetitive rhythms and patterns can wear down a player.
And this is kind of what happened to Kobe Bryant in a way, because Kobe Bryant, if you see how he worked out, it was a repetitive rhythm. Repetitive rhythm. He would practice the same moves over and over and over and over again, the same footwork, the same basic things. It would take it to great level, but he would not take the rest on the same level. He would barely sleep. He would work out, overwork out, and it wore him down. He had Achilles injuries. He had fingers injury. He had ankles injury. He had a lot of injuries that wore him down. He was still able to be great even after his injuries. He would adapt and everything, but it wasn't the same. And just having to go through these hard injuries could have been prevented. But at the same time, I feel like this is one reason. I know this is not a video about Kobe, but this is one reason that makes Kobe so great, because he really went all in. And that's passion, and that's love, and that's dedication, and that's something that like not everybody would do. And it's really why Kobe is one of one. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's painful, but it's beautiful. That's why a lot of people respect Kobe Bryant, from all over the generation. But in terms of like, long term, I feel like Federer approach is better. I feel like it's better than Kobe's. It might be not as like beautiful in terms of like, in terms of obsession and story, even though it's a beautiful story too. But is just better because there's more balance and he's able to do what he did longer with more efficiency in a way. Even though like it's hard to compare because it's like sometimes super extremes it equals like the balance that it's hard to compare it, but I feel like Federer is better because he built himself for like longevity.
And he also focused on the mind too. Fresh legs were vital, but no more vital than feeling fresh in the head. Mm-hmm. When other people are asked to describe Paganini, the word you usually hear is unusual. And so this is really Paganini just saying, this is the goal. This is what we're trying to do with Federer, and we're trying to do it from the very beginning. To have potential is one thing, but to express it for 70 matches a year is something else. That is Roger's goal, to be consistent in each match he plays and each training session he does. So this idea of, hey, we're going to emphasize the long game. We're going to assume that your career is going to last many decades. And so we're going to develop a training schedule that allows your body to survive and thrive over decades. This part made me think of the co-founder of Nike, Bill Bowerman. Bill Bowerman was Phil Knight's track coach at Oregon. And he had these ideas decades before anybody else. I read this excellent biography of Bill Bowerman probably 6 years ago. I want to pull out some ideas from here because I think it's so important. And I think the analogy in entrepreneurship just jumps off the page. It's completely obvious. Bowerman's core point was that rest and recovery aren't a break from training. They're a central part of the mechanism that makes training work. Bowerman explains training as a simple loop. Stress, recover, improve. You apply a stimulus, you let the body rest, and then a little miracle happens. You get
stress, recover, improve. It's really simplified and true. Even outside of like physical training, even if you take mental training, let's say you're studying hard for an exam, you're studying hard for anything, that's when you focus, there's going to be the stress while you're studying. And then when you sleep is actually when all the downloads of the information, goes into your brain, and then you retain, and then, all the scenarios start making sense. And then you're going to wake up, and that's where the improvements are felt. And it's the same for physical workouts. You're going to go out, you're going to work out, whether it's tennis, you're going to get your repetition in, whether it's running, whether it's basketball, whether it's soccer, baseball. You're going to stress your body, you're going to stress yourself. Then you're going to sleep. And then actually it's a phenomenon like when you sleep, everything's going to be repeated backwards for some reason and then downloaded into your body, into your mind. It's like neuroplasticity. And then you're going to wake up the next time, and then the next time you're going to go out to perform, you're going to feel the improvement, and then you're going to build on top of that. So stress, recover, improve. So recovery is important. And then going out again to get the improvement, and then repeating the stress is also important. It's come from the repetition, from the loop.
Stronger, faster, and more enduring. Bowerman immediately pairs that with a warning. Work too hard plus rest too little equals injury.
And I don't want to, repeat myself, but it's what really happened with Kobe, sadly.
A big part of why this mattered is that culturally, many athletes felt rest was weak-willed or ignoble. And Bowerman pushed them directly against that instinct.
And even in the scene of like let's say college basketball, or even lower, depending on where you play, depending on what program you play, a lot of times it's seen like that, like, it's seen as like rest is, like weak-minded. There is some case of like, you got players that, don't work hard, and then they're expecting to like, rest after and everything. The rest got to be deserved. You got to stress yourself first before getting the rest. But we shouldn't we shouldn't put the rest on a lower level than the stress. The rest should be as important as the stress.
Bowerman's edge was being decades early to treating recovery as equal to work. And Bowerman didn't
saying.
mean rest as laziness. He meant rest as intelligent restraint in service of long-term consistency. That is exactly.
He said rest as intelligent restraint for long-term consistency. Because he knows you gotta stress, you gotta rest, then you're gonna improve, and then you repeat. And then repeating that long, like a lot of times, is gonna lead you to greatness.
Exactly where we are in the story. Intelligent restraint in service of long-term consistency. That is excellent. And so there's a series of coaches and people in Federer's life that see his talent and are trying to help him understand how much work is ahead of him and constantly holding him to high expectations. And so Federer's a teenager at this time. He's around 14 or so. And this one coach, who they describe as no nonsense, is teaching a young Federer about how much self-sacrifice and self-discipline were required to succeed in the way that Federer said he wanted to succeed. And the way he did this is he said, I didn't cut him any slack. It's not in my nature. I didn't give these young players any room to breathe. And one thing that he observed about Federer is that he had a natural inclination to want to play all the time. He was overflowing with emotion and energy.
That's amazing for him. Like, like, yes, you can like apply this mindset, to yourself, but if on top of that, you can have people around you that understand this and help you apply it, or like amplify the application of this, you're just bound for greatness all together. So really, like, if you see this, like, really pay attention to like who you have in your circle and what you have in your circle, what you're feeding your brain, and what energy you're interacting with, because it's gonna affect you. It's gonna affect you, and when you know that, you have control of how and what you want to affect you, then you have control of like where you want to go.
He had to play. He had to move. Above all, he's a player. And we see the exact same thing from Federer as a teenager that we saw when he was 8 years old, that he wants to be the best, that he wants to be number one. He's with all these other young junior players. They're all in the same program, and they're filling in a form in which they're supposed to state their tennis goals. Most of them wrote down that they hope to break into the top 100 in the world. Roger was the only one of us to write that he wanted to become number one. And this no-nonsense coach notices the exact same deficiency in Federer.
And never be scared to aim for the best. Never be scared to aim for the best. Like, if that's what you want, that's what you want. If that's not what you want, that's okay too. That's not for you. But if that's what you want, that's what you want, and you gotta accept it, and you gotta understand that like not everyone really wants it, and that means that a lot of people are not gonna be for you. That means there's gonna be sacrifices in terms of like who you have around you, because if they don't believe in it, if for them it's not reality, it's something that's not possible, well then how they're gonna interact with you is they're gonna try to make it impossible for you, because not because they don't want you to succeed, it's because for them it's not reality. It's kind of like an energy thing. It's like for them it's not reality, so it cannot happen by any means. It cannot happen because there's a blockage. But if you're with other people that for them it's reality, like it has to happen, and this is what we're gonna do, this is what we are doing, not even we're gonna, this is what we are doing, then it is happening. It's a big difference. So it's really important, and sometimes it's hard because it's people you love, people you respect, people you see every day, people you've been together for like years. But then you gotta understand like what do you want, who do you want to become, and then you gotta make the choice.
That he notices early in his career that he winds up fixing. He said, I could see no barriers when he played. The only thing that could stop him was his head. And I said to him, try not to be your own enemy, because it'll be a lot more complicated. Again, the inner game of tennis. I read this section, think about one of my favorite.
I like that. Try not to be your own enemy, because it's gonna be complicated. There's a lot like narratives saying like, it's always you versus you. And we gotta even like it's true, but you gotta understand even the bigger picture of that, because yes, it's you versus you, but it's you versus you to make yourself better. So there's well, even when you battle with yourself, you understand you building yourself up. So you're not going against the other you. You're not going against you. You're sparring to get better. So your mind sharpens and elevates altogether.
Quotes comes from Brad Jacobs. Brad Jacobs wrote in his book How to Make a
See it this way, like let's say you and your friends are playing chess. You know, you and your friends are friends, right? Let's say we're friends. We're playing chess, but the pieces are at war. The pieces hate each other and want to kill each other. But we're using the pieces to make our mind better. And then, once the game is out, we're friends and we just helped each other. No matter who won, we helped each other elevate our mind. And the amount of elevation that we get is the amount of, like work, focus, and like, effort we put into the game.
Few $1 billion, so much of success in business and life is keeping your head in a good place.
That's fair.
And Federer is going to have a few different ways to keep his head in a good place. One, he's going to get this mental coach, which I'll talk to you about in 1 second. He does this early on in life. And number two, he does something really smart, especially at the very beginning. You're going to doubt yourself enough. You can't have other people around you doubting you. You have to run away from naysayers. And there's a funny story in the book about this where Federer literally switches his dentist because he didn't want to hear any negativity. And so he stops formal schooling at 16 to pursue being a professional tennis player. And so he visits his dentist.
This is exactly what I said before. Because if people, I'm gonna let the story go. I'm gonna let the story go. I'm gonna let the story go.
And his dentist is like, so what are you doing now? And Federer's like, well, I'm playing tennis. And his dentist goes, okay, well, what else? And Federer goes, that's it. I'm just playing tennis. And he looked at me shocked. He said, that's it? Just tennis? And so Federer changed dentists. This is why. I never went back because I just felt like he's not really understanding what I'm trying to do here. I'm chasing a dream. I'm trying to aim for the stars, and he's trying to pull me back. I don't want to be surrounded by people like this.
He said, I'm chasing a dream and I don't want him to pull me back. And the dentist, all he said was really just tennis, because for him it's something impossible. But the dentist didn't say like, oh, you can't do it, or like, like, I'm gonna hold you back. It's just because the lack of belief, the lack of open mindedness, the lack of determination for like that goal, that dream is a limit, is like a blockage. And Federer, he doesn't want that blockage. He want to reach it, So he said, okay, if you're an obstacle, then I'm gonna move the obstacle out of my way and go with people that are gonna build the road with me, that understand where we're going to, not gonna try to bring me somewhere else where I want to be is not possible to go to.
And one of the funniest ways to deal with people like this, I actually read in Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, the one that he wrote when he was in his 70s. One of his mentors was Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball was probably the most powerful.
Also, before that, he said he had a mental coach. That's different. Having a mental coach, that's different. A lot of pro athletes have mental coaches. I feel like for the general public, it's having like strong figures in your life, strong people around you, that understand you and your vision, and they're gonna, talk or enact good things around you. Because I don't think mental coaches are just accessible, like that, like good, mental coaches. But it definitely, if you can have someone like this in your corner, it's definitely an insane edge. And it's also, you gotta be ready for that stress, because like we heard at the beginning, like we understood at the beginning, they said there's a bigger gap between number 4 and number 3 than number 200 and number 4. So if you have that great of a mental gap, then that means a lot of people are not gonna understand what you're going through, and you're gonna be isolated in a way. And there's a saying, I heard it from PBM, shout out Plaguebo Max. He said, sometimes you gotta separate to elevate, but it's not easy. Being isolated, it's not easy. That's why a lot of people, when they're at the top, the circle is really, really tight. It's really, really tight because there's a handful of people that separate themselves mentally to that point. And it's not easy. You can see if you go watch PBM channel, PBM 555, you're gonna see like he's going through a lot of mental battles, spiritual battles right now, and he's sharing it with the public. Some understand, some don't understand, but it's part of being one of the greats.
Woman in Hollywood at the time she starts mentoring Arnold, and she gave him hilarious advice that he actually applied verbatim. It says, Lucille Ball gave me advice about Hollywood. Just remember, when they say no, you hear yes and act accordingly. Someone says to you, we can't do this movie, you hug him and say, thank you for believing in me. I absolutely love that. You hug him and say, thank you for believing in me. Let's go back to this again, on having high standards, on being held to high standards, and wanting to be the very best. He talks about the cultural differences of all the tennis, the tennis players in Switzerland. And he felt that it was important for them to actually aim a little higher, as we just saw, like, oh, maybe I can break into the top 100. And Federer's like, no, I'm going to be number 1. I did feel it was possible for me to aim for the stars. I think we could do a little bit better job to believe, like in America, that anything is possible, that we should dream big. I feel sometimes we don't believe because we're kept in education, a job, and safety and security. I feel that can sometimes block us from going all out and saying, let's take a chance, let's go for it, let's follow our dreams.
I feel that 100%, and if you're watching this, you probably feel it too. Like, maybe you got people around you saying like, oh, you're always going for the big play, you're always going for the home run, always going for this and that. It's not even that, because on a daily, we're stacking up the small wins, but we understand the bigger picture in mind. But then they don't see the small wins because they feel that big energy of where we want to be, and this is overshadowing little details. Yes, we're countlessly like, doing things, and it looks like we're trying to hit big, but it's not that we're trying to hit big. It's just that we're building brick by brick, layers by layers, so that at the end, it's big. But
let's see what happens. But half and half doesn't cut it. If a guy in China or Russia or America or Argentina or wherever trains 5 hours and you only train 2, how is that going to work? It's not realistic then to become the greatest ever. It's not by dreaming that you're going to be top 250 that you're ever going to win Wimbledon. So this is when he begins working with a mental coach. His mental coach is this guy named Christian Marcoli. I think this is one of the most important ideas in the book. The idea was to provide Federer with some tools to change his patterns and manage his emotions more systematically, especially when matches got tight.
Hold up. I think this is like a gem, because it's not something evident when you ask yourself like, how do I gain a mental edge? It's not something that's like evident, like, oh, just do this and that. So I think it's important that we see how he did it, how Federer did it. Say, with some tools to change his patterns and manage
his emotions more systematically.
Okay, so he would change. Okay, so basically he would find his negative patterns and fix them, or find his positive patterns and build up on them. Okay, and then he would manage his emotion more systematically. So what he would do is manage his emotion more systematically. So he would find what worked to deal with certain emotions. So let's say he would be angry, he would like focus on his breathing. I'm taking an example because we're all different. Maybe when someone is angry, they have a different way of dealing with that anger to like, you know, manage it properly. So I'm gonna say like, let's say I'm angry, and I focus on my breathing to like channel that anger and into something more positive than just crashing out. And that's a system. That's one system for anger. Let's say I'm sad, instead of like, you know, being in like in a ball and, you know, like pouting. Maybe it's spending time with family. That's another system. And then finding, you know, systems and putting them together and managing my emotions as a whole. That's how I'm taking it. He said, especially when matches got tight. So for him, he's talking about when he's in the court. But you can also apply this when you're outside the court. You know, if you apply this in your business, your family life, your relationship with others, with yourself, with God, everything.
Especially when matches got tight.
What you need.
Federer chose to address his mental weaknesses when he was still quite young. He was not yet 17 when he began collaborating with Marcoli. And so Marcoli describes it this way. There's another fundamental component, which is, are you at peace with yourself? Is your overall life plan more or less in place, which gives you the fundamental joy to be here, or would you rather be somewhere else? Roger has always had the passion to win. At a certain moment of his career, he made the choice to learn how to use this energy in a constructive way so he could reach his maximum potential. That was the focus of our work together. This is so important. Just like his fitness coach, the ideas that his fitness coach had, they were not what everybody else was doing. The same thing. This shows how important this was. Consulting a performance psychologist or a mental coach was then still widely viewed as a sign of vulnerability. It also did not dovetail with the rugged individualism that Federer adopted and enjoyed projecting once he reached maturity, going significant stretches without a formal coach or agent. Again, I think that speaks to how important it was. Neither Marcoli nor Federer has publicly explained their work in detail because that is Federer's wish. That part is fascinating. They only worked together for a short while, and then they both agreed not to go into detail about what exactly they did. This kind of reminds me of, I read this biography of Alexander the Great, and his tutor, his one-on-one tutor when he was a young man was actually Aristotle. And much later in life, there was a rift between Alexander the Great and Aristotle because Alexander did not like that Aristotle was teaching publicly what Aristotle had taught Alexander privately. Alexander did not want his opponents to have the edge that he had. And so go back to what Federer was saying in the commencement address, that everybody for...
Another reason why I love David Senra's podcast, because like he doesn't only goes over, you know, current figures, he also go into past figures, and this is exactly what great minds do. Like all the greatest minds had someone they would look up to build up their, you know, model of their own life, you know, like Kobe had MJ, who else, Steve Jobs. Even Steve Jobs was looking up to I forgot his name, but he was the guy that was doing the polarized, the Polaroid, I think it's called. It's like the cameras and everything. Even like every figures, and if you're gonna see it when you're gonna listen to the Founders podcast, I'm gonna put the link in the bio, by the way, so y'all can, you know, type in and gain all of this beautiful knowledge. Everyone had someone they will look up to, and then you see how he said the patterns from Federer was similar to Alexander the Great, and it's because that knowledge and has been passed down and from greats to greats to greats to greats. And before, this was not accessible, but now we live in a different era. We live in eras of information, and now we're shifting to another era where it's like, I know we all have the information. Is now it's like, what do we do with the information? That's the new era we're in, but we still got this information, and go see that information. Like, go study the greatest from the past, because at the end of the day, we're still humans. Yes, we've built on top of it, but a lot of it is the same in principles. So if you can apply the principles to the current situation that you're dealing with, you have the opportunity to do great things as well.
Years was calling him out on this since he was a little boy all the way to a teenager. And so I'll read this one paragraph from the book. So many people in his early life say exactly this. Roger was fragile emotionally. He could not accept defeat. He was mediocre in training. He was not a big worker. He was fooling around most of the time. To me, that is the core to this story. The fact that he adapted, the fact that he changed, the fact that he improved over time. And the beauty of this is a skill he could keep his entire life. This is
powerful because even someone as great as Roger Federer, it's not like he was born great. You know, like he was fooling around, he was mediocre, and you know, he was just going through the motions. But then he decided to flip the switch and get things done. You know, like I feel like, you know, we were blessed in life because life is not like chess. You know, in life at any point can a fool become a king, and it's only when the fool's gonna decide to act like a king that things gonna start to click for him. And you know, but it has to be a choice, and you have to act like it too.
His now mental coach, not talking about the 16, 17, 18-year-old Federer that he was working with, but now looking back after Federer retired. When I see Roger today, I always tell him, what you do on the court is extraordinary, but how you handle your life, to me, is out of this world. The game doesn't care where you slept, what you did, how many people you met. The game is pure. And he managed over 20 years to come out and play it with humility and that same amount of connection it takes to be able to keep winning matches. The way he approached his work, the dignity, the level of concentration, to me, he's a role model. And I think a large component of the work they did that was successful is the fact that Federer can now be in the moment. This point in front of me is the most important point in the world. But then when it's behind, it is behind. So it says what fascinated me about Roger then and still is that he managed to live in the present. He has a great ability to take things as they come. He lives a moment, experiences it fully, takes pleasure in it, and finishes it, and then moves on to the next. It is the reason you have the feeling that things happen very naturally with him. It is a talent, and it is a talent that even today fascinates me more than his tennis. This is exactly.
I also think this mindset is what's going to make, you know, like people going to make me more happier in life, you know, like just being in the moment present and being grateful for as much things as possible, and you know, executing on all the things I want to execute on. Just, you know, like take the moment in as much as possible and act on the moment as much as I can, as much as I want to. It's going to make me more happier because that's what life is about. But if, you know, I take the past and I project it in the present or in the future, or I take the future and I stress myself in the present moment because I'm not in the future, which doesn't even make sense because I can't be in the future. I'm always in the present. I can't be in the future. I can want to head somewhere, but all my power lies in the present. So that's really is a powerful thing for the mental state and to be happier in general.
What people would say about Michael Jordan. I've done a bunch of episodes on Michael Jordan, but this quote from episode 340, which is on Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant together, I love, and it's exactly what they're talking about with Federer. If one thing separated Michael from every other player, it was his stunning ability to block out everything and everyone else. This dedication to learning how to control his mind is mentioned over and over again. He was able to shut out everything except his mission. Most people live in fear because we project the past into the future. Michael is a mystic. He was never anywhere else. His gift was that he was able to be completely present. The big downfall of otherwise gifted players is thinking about failure. He would say, why would I think about missing a shot I haven't taken yet? And so whether it's his decision to work with this esoteric and unusual fitness coach, going against the trend to have a mental coach, even having his wife work with him, all of these decisions helped because he was building what Charlie Munger said is some of the best, most important piece of advice, is that you need to build a seamless web of deserved trust. And so as many times in the book, it talks about the value of the team that Federer built. The other component is to trust that life is going in the right direction and to trust that the close people around you do a great job and that you don't need to worry or think about something else. And I think Roger always had the ability to surround himself with people he can trust, and he does fully trust. It takes a while to get that trust, but once you're in, nothing is second guessed. And before we get back into this incredible story, I need to tell you about Vanta. Vanta helps your company prove that you're secure so more customers will use your product or service. The more your business grows, the more complex your security and compliance tools get. This can turn into chaos, and Vanta helps you tame that chaos. You can think of Vanta as your always-on AI-powered security expert who scales with you. Vanta automates compliance, continuously monitors your controls, and gives you a single source of truth for compliance and risk. So whether you're a fast-growing startup like Cursor or an enterprise company like Snowflake, Vanta fits easily into your existing workflows so you can keep growing a company that your customers can trust. Many companies will not sign contracts unless you're certified, and this is causing you to lose out on sales. That is why the average Vanta customer reports a 526% return on investment after becoming a Vanta customer. Vanta will help you win trust, close deals, and stay secure faster and with less effort. Go to vanta.com/founders and you will get $1,000 off. That is vanta.com/founders. Back to this idea again about the importance of having this abundance of self-confidence, that Federer had a higher belief in himself than his ability at that time would demonstrate. Here's a great example. He's about to go to the Olympics and he says, "I would very much like to come back with a gold medal." That's strong words from a 19-year-old who was ranked 43rd and had yet to win an ATP Tour title. So learning to have this mental discipline, learning how to control his emotions, it was better for his game, but it also winds up being better for his business. And part of this is because he understood that as he became more prominent, as he starts to win more matches, his on-court antics and throwing this fit, breaking rackets, cursing, it actually risked defining his image. And when he'd watch his matches back and he'd see himself act like this, he was actually embarrassed. He says, "That was a career-defining moment for me. I started to feel uncomfortable after a while when you're on TV like this. It's just a bad look when you see yourself throw the racket in the corner and you're like, oh my God." And you're looking around and you're frustrated and disappointed. And I just said, this just looks so stupid and silly. Let's get your act together now. You're on a big stage and you can't behave like this anymore. You're behaving like this when you're playing somebody like Pete Sampras or somebody else that you actually...
What this reminds me of is a lot of people in the entertainment scene, especially like in the streaming scene, YouTuber scene, everything. Like, a lot of times sometimes they exaggerate, for the views, for the clicks and everything, where they crash out and everything. And this is exactly like, I think how they're gonna feel later in the future. They're gonna feel a little bit embarrassed about themselves because, yes, it helps them get clicks, engagement. They call it clip farming, engagement farming, clickbaiting and everything, because it gets them paid, it gets them known, it gets them seen. But sometimes it's not for the good reasons. And that's why I really respect KC3, Kai Cenat, because I think after Mafeton 3, I think that's kind of what he realized. I'm not saying he was doing all of this, but he was good. He was not doing it in an embarrassing way, but he was definitely doing it to a level that was not doing justice to his intelligence. That's what I'm saying, because the way he orchestrated his come up, and after his come up, his air, because he had Twitch on lock. Like, he was the king of Twitch when he was acting on Twitch. He was literally the king of Twitch. Like, you would see it was crazy. You would see on the side all the streamers, great streamers, top streamers live, and as soon as you would see Kai Cenat go live, all the streamers will lose their views and they will all go to Kai Cenat. You know, like it's not something that is normal. It's like, you know, really it's great. It's greatness. And he definitely, you know, put some time into creating, you know, this power and this influence and this platform. You know, everything he was doing was, you know, was positive. You know, he was always trying to bring joy to the people. And it's not something that happens by luck. It's not something that just happens. You gotta think it through. You gotta plan it, and then you gotta execute it. It's intelligence. And after Marathon 3, he definitely, I think he got tired of pretending to be something. Not some. I'm not saying he was. He definitely, you know, all entertainers, they gotta dive into a character, but I think he wanted to live up to who he can really be. That's what I'm trying to say. He's trying to live up to who he can really be, and he didn't want to dumb himself down. He wanted to, you know, showcase the full display of, you know, his intelligence, his execution, his creative power, and, you know, his just full display of who he is really, and not hide behind a mask just to entertain, just to click farm, just to get engagement, just to get views. And, you know, he wanted to be really Kai Cenat. He wanted to be him, you know, like his full name. I forgot his name. I think it's Carlson something. And I respect that. And it's funny because a lot of people, you know, they switched on him after. But that's another debate. That's a debate for another day. That's a debate for another day. Yeah.
Admire. It just can't be like this. And it was interesting that talks about the inner rage is still there. It's just developing the skill to not let it bubble to the surface. It was enough to finally calm Federer, at least on the outside. Inside, the blood still boils. Federer confirmed as much. It was about learning to control the flames. This is such a great line. It was about learning to control the flames instead of extinguishing them, about converting them into slow-burning fuel rather than a bonfire of distraction. And so all the work that he's doing, all the skills that he's acquiring starts to pay off. And at just 21 years old, Federer wins his first title at Wimbledon. And it says a weight had been lifted, a number of weaknesses addressed, and he was ready to hit some serious heights. Go back to that coach who was coaching when he was 14 and saying, hey, I'm not cutting him any slack. He was sitting there watching this at Wimbledon. And after he won, he says, look how far he has come. And then he pauses, reflecting back on this, right? From 14 to 21. Look at how much work this guy has done. He's a completely different person. Look how far he has come. And then now, 20 years later from this point, he says, and now I'm thinking about how far he went after that. Again, that is what I found most fascinating about the book, the long run of Roger Federer. And it says Roger really made up his mind that he was going to be the best player.
The long run, for me, like long-term thinking is really important. Long-term thinking is really important. I not despise, but I really don't prioritize anything that's short-term. I don't have intentions of building things that are short-term minded. If it's short-term minded, I'm really not interested. If it's long-term minded, then I see diamonds. No, for me, it's like, okay, this is the type of people, this is the type of thing around me. It's rare though, because you gotta go against human nature to do that. Human nature is kind of programmed to think short-term, so it's rare, you know.
On the planet, not just the most talented or the most gifted player on the planet, but the best. And one thing he starts tapping into is the history of the sport. He starts studying the great tennis players, dead and living. And it says, though he had been an indifferent student in school, Federer was drawn to the history of his chosen sport, a curiosity that only deepened as he proceeded to make so much tennis history himself. I asked a lot of questions, and I had a great bunch of guys around me when I came up on tour that educated me as well, Federer said. They were like, look, this is somebody who played at semis in Wimbledon back in 1968. And this is somebody who won the doubles back in 1954. Kobe Bryant said the exact same thing in that book that he wrote called Mamba Mentality. So he talked about the importance of studying the greats. He says, just as important as reading about them was cultivating relationships with the greats who had come before me. Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Jerry West, James Worthy. Those guys taught me the lessons that gave me an edge over my competition. It is so important to have those mentors, those North Stars who you learn from and look up to. Back to Federer saying the exact same thing on the importance of studying the greats of your profession. They did something very special that I could profit from even today. I wish all the youngsters come.
Doing this, like you can tell yourself like, oh, but we don't all have access to talking to the greats, whether it's Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Steph Curry, or we don't have direct access. But this is why Founders Podcast is really like one of the best for me. It's for me, and I think objectively speaking, is the best podcast in terms of value that you get, because there's so many studies by David done on the greatest minds, that has been on earth, that it's almost like getting direct mentorship from them, because David really goes into their minds and their life and then approaches from different perspective, that it's like talking to them, it's like living with them, but you gotta focus, you gotta also re-listen and everything, but it's like getting direct mentorship, and you gotta apply it too.
Coming up on tour would be super, super curious to find out everything about tennis. You should know what's so interesting about these people. Something that surprised me and something that was highly unusual is that Federer would go for long stretches with no official coach. So in this case, he announces that he and his coach Lundgren were splitting. Says Federer made another risky choice to change a winning team. This was a pattern throughout his career. Federer was not too sentimental to break bonds when his inner voice was shouting that he needed change. Go back to what he said in that commencement address. Trusting yourself is a talent. Federer said he felt that they had fallen into a routine. The decision comes from me alone. I am the one who has to be satisfied, nobody else. Federer had no official coach at this stage. This was highly unusual for a great young player who could have met the salary demands of any coach of his choosing. But Federer was in no hurry to...
Side note, when I'm looking on the side, is because I see the text screen here, the podcast, but I also have it mirror on a bigger monitor. So I'm paying attention whether I'm looking here or here. I'm locked in. So I'm with y'all.
Place Lundgren. And that ability to trust himself led him to have this long career. And there's a ton of people in the book where they're comparing and contrasting their approach to their game and their fitness and their training, and contrasting it with Federer's approach. And so there's this one player, Safin, who's an example of this. Safin also struggled with significant injuries throughout his professional career. It is hard not to wonder what might have been if he, in his teens, had met a fitness guru like Paganini and spent some quality time with a performance psychologist like Marcoli. While Federer came remarkably close to maximizing his abilities and optimizing his chances, Safin undeniably did not. This is what he said: the higher I went, the more I started to be heavy in my head. I sometimes had the sparks of, wow, this is really pleasant. But most of the time it was heavy pressure. I felt it all the time and I got burned out. So I was actually shocked at how much in this book and the Agassi book, and I'm starting to read on Novak Djokovic too, the emotional pain that these guys go through. They are constantly overwhelmed with emotion and sobbing and crying and being distraught after a loss. And Federer is no different. I think the difference that Federer has is his ability to get over it quickly. He could lose Wimbledon, be crying his eyes out in the locker room or the shower, and then be at dinner with friends a few hours later. And so a source of emotional...
This is something that's gonna make someone like live a really much more happier life. able to deal with losses and fast. Like he won 80% of his matches. You're gonna lose. Like, no, whatever domain you're in, you're gonna fail. You're gonna have success. You can have a lot of success. Even the most successful person on earth has been through a lot of failures. So to be able to deal with these failures is gonna make your life better. And if you're able to do it quickly, this means that you're gonna have less moment when you're feeling bad, and you're gonna feel happier. I think it's important because our time on earth is limited. So if you can bounce back quick and be happy and get on to the next one and try to win the next thing by being in the moment and just enjoying the moment, you're gonna be happier. It doesn't mean that you're gonna win the next one. Hopefully you do, and you're gonna work hard and you do win. But you're gonna even help yourself even more if you can bounce back after that loss quicker, and not just bounce back by, oh, I'm gonna put the work in after. It's just like bounce back in all aspects. Not feel super down when you're around your family, when you feel that type of way. Like, it's okay to feel that way, but don't overdo it. Keep it balanced. It's hard, but it's a skill. And this is why the gap between number 4 and number 3 is bigger than number 204, because it's a skill.
Pain.
The more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you become at it. And I'm really glad that I get to like know this, even from a perspective from David Senra and from Federer. Even though it's like tennis is not my domain, but this is something really powerful because I can really apply it to anything. Like, what it could be a breakup. It could be a breakup. Like, you can break up from a long relationship, and you're gonna feel sad, probably gonna cry, but probably gonna feel angry and everything. You're probably gonna feel some type of way. But the faster you bounce back, then the faster you can focus on your next win and building a healthy relationship with yourself and someone else.
Both Federer and Nadal is the rivalry that they have with one another. And I think the author does a great job of describing how different they are, but also with the similarities they have. So I want to read a big section to you here. Federer was increasingly accepting of being viewed as a part of a pair. In the beginning, I didn't want a rival, he said. Federer and Nadal were a great stylistic contrast. Federer was elegance, acquired cool, and effortless power. Nadal was exuberance, innate fire, and flexed biceps. Federer was smooth and classical. Nadal was rugged and avant-garde. Federer was tradition. Nadal was youth. Their pre-game approach was also worlds apart. James Blake beat Nadal in the semifinals in Indian Wells that year and then lost to Federer in the final. It was so funny to me, he said, the differences in dynamic in the locker room. Before the match, Rafa's got on his big headphones and he's running up and down the locker room, doing the sprints, tapping his fingers. He's like a caged animal. And then the next day I'm playing Roger, and we're talking about his house back in Switzerland, and he just bought some land. And it's about what he and his wife are going to do. And it was honestly like we were sitting at a coffee shop as calm as can be. Yet both men were remarkable at flipping the switch when it came time for combat. Nadal's transformation came in the locker room. Federer's on the court. I think people discredit what a killer Roger really is, Blake said, because he is so relaxed before the match, and he's saying, oh yeah, come out and see the Swiss countryside. It's beautiful. And then he goes out and kicks my ass. He still has that absolute fighter's mentality, that attitude of, I'm going to win. But there were also strong commonalities. They were sensitive and empathetic and raised by their families to believe that manners matter. Federer's motto was, it's nice to be important, but...
It's cool to know, like, a lot of times, people think you have to be an asshole. You have to be, mean. You have to be, someone disrespectful to like be great, and not get walked over. But I feel like there's different ways to be great. Like, I'm sure that even though he was, polite and everything off the court, I'm sure that in his play style he would express, that ruthlessness. I'm sure he would, like that he wouldn't express that savageness to his play style.
More important to be nice. And Nadal and his family subscribe to, you are not special because of who you are, but because of what you do. Both were close to their parents, but had relied heavily in their youth on a former tennis pro whose own career aspirations had fallen short. Even their choice in fitness trainer was similar. Both of their fitness trainers were deep thinkers who preferred to work unconventionally in the shadows instead of traveling the circuit. Both have an old school streak, a belief that face-to-face relations and traditions are worth preserving. Both increasingly used analytics to some degree at their coach's behest, but both preferred to free their minds and let their instincts reign under pressure. Roger, for example, is not a big fan of stats in tennis, Nadal said. Neither am I. He likes and respects the history of sport and respects the stories of champions like I do. Among their mutual understanding was that their rivalry was very good for business. And what's interesting to me, at least in their public statements, is just how much respect they had for one another. At one point, Nadal's just beating Federer constantly, even though Federer at this point has, more Grand Slam titles, more wins. And Nadal was trying to direct the conversation when he's talking to the media. It's like, I'm not trying to surpass Federer. That's not what I like about the sport. What I like about the sport is fighting. This was very interesting. And so it says Nadal was different.
This is like the chess analogy I was talking about. Like, you got the two players, then you got the chess pieces. And what Nadal likes most is the action of the pieces are playing.
To revel in surpassing Federer was not the point. The meaning was in playing each point. I love the competition. When I compete, I love to be there and to fight for the win. Maybe I like fighting to win more than to win. Rafael Nadal told Larry Ellison something very similar. I found this passage from one of the biographies of Larry Ellison that I read. Earlier, Nadal had said something that made a deep impression on Larry Ellison. When asked if he loved winning, Nadal shook his head and replied, "No, I love the fight. If you fight hard, the winning will come." Let's go back to another recurring idea that helped him achieve the long game and the durable career that he had. He said in the commencement address that life is bigger than the court. His outside life actually helped him get over losses more quickly. This happens over and over again. It's mentioned over and over again in the book. He has happiness to fall back on. I just adore the fact that his family travels everywhere with him, like a traveling show. The whole family is so tight. I really admire that, and I think Roger is a really good person. He's got a good heart, and it's hard to find that when you're in a tough sport. It's hard to find that gentleness. This is what Federer says about that. These are little things you start doing over the years to get away from the sport and do something different, he said. Because tennis is a big focus, but there's also something else in life, the private side, with my girlfriend and my family. I want to keep that intact as well, because I can only play good tennis when I'm happy. Federer's priority was to keep himself fresh physically and mentally, to be smart about scheduling and training loads, but also to be smart about how much he put himself in the spotlight and in group settings. Again, everything he's doing, the decisions he's making, the decisions his coaches are making, they're optimizing for the long game. He wants to avoid burning out, to being a bright star in the sky that burns out prematurely. And he goes into much detail. This might be the best. He says a lot of things in the book about this. This might be my favorite part. As much as I take things very seriously, I'm very laid back, so I can really let go very quickly, meaning let go of losses. I truly believe this is a secret for a lot of the players, and for the young guys, is to be able, when you leave the court, to say, okay, I'm leaving it behind. I still know I'm a professional tennis player, but I'm relaxing. I'm doing it my way. Whatever way helps me decompress. Federer stopped speaking for a moment and showed me his clenched fist. Because if you're constantly like this, looking at his fist, then that's how you burn out. And so he's asked the question, so you never had a bit of burnout, I asked. He thought for a good 30 seconds before answering. If I do feel burnout coming on, what I've tried to do is break it down to the absolute minimum. And this is the absolute minimum. That's practice, matches, and family. I will do less press, less autographs, less public appearances, less stuff in the public eye. I need to gather myself, to gather my energy for the main purpose, which is the match. I had a period of 3 months once where I asked the tour to help me out a little bit because I was tired from the constant everyday grind of being in front of the media. That's where I felt it the most, but that was a short period of time. And then this part reminds me of this idea that's in Rick Rubin's book. The book's called The Creative Act. I just did an episode on it a few weeks ago. And he talked about that it's really important to find the time that you work best and you protect that time. And for Roger Federer, this late night alone time is key to not burning out. Late night is his therapy time. That's his alone time. That's his me time. He doesn't need to be Paul's player, that's his coach, or Mirka's husband, or Mila and Charlene's dad, or even Roger Federer, the icon. He protects that therapy time, that alone time, that me time. And then one thing he also does is, even though he's training all the time and he's working all the time, he likes to mix it up. He likes to keep himself from not getting bored. I hadn't been around someone that had as much flexibility in their approach that Federer does. At Wimbledon, he has all these different houses all the time. He doesn't have superstitions. He doesn't always need to practice in the same place or have one favorite meal. This was a key element in Federer's career longevity. Too much routine can kill the joy. Too much constant focus can grind you down. And I think
that's really powerful, and I'm gonna steal that, because a lot of time, we want to follow routines, want to follow, just follow routine, yeah, and then it gets boring, gets draining. But this is a good way to keep everything fresh.
Key to this is Federer understood what drove him. It was an inner scorecard. At the end of the day, it was a competition with himself. This is a great quote, great paragraph from Federer. The idea is that you want to prove to yourself you can do it and not to other people. That's why for me, this rivalry with Rafa, okay, it's interesting, but in the end, I care about winning tournaments. That for me is the bottom line. And if Rafa happens to be on the other side, even better, because then I can beat the main rival or make a great story on top of that. But I think what people like or Tiger Woods, he's spending a lot of time with Tiger Woods at this point, but I think what people like or Tiger Woods are more interested in is not who we're playing or racing against. You want to do it the best you can. It is important you can wake up in the morning and go to bed feeling good about yourself and your effort. And of course, all these different ideas made him more successful on the court, and the more successful he was on the court, the more successful he was in business. There's a bunch of different numbers in the book, but there's just a handful of highlights I want to pull out. They give you a sense of the business that he has built. He's one of the very few billionaire athletes on the planet today, and the vast majority of his money has come from off the court. And so they call this Federer Inc. Federer Inc. continued on its upward trajectory. By 2013, Federer's annual income had reached an estimated $71 million. That put him second on the 2013 Forbes list of world's highest paid athletes, behind Tiger Woods and ahead of Kobe Bryant. He takes pride in delivering personalized service, so most of this is long-term sponsorships with these giant companies. Even in his early years, he would visit all 21 of the sponsor suites at the Swiss indoor tournament to do meet and greets. He's just so good. If you've seen him with sponsors, with CEOs, he just has the ability to make you feel like he really cares about what you're saying and that he has time for you. He's never rushing you. If you're a fan at a 100-person event that one of his sponsors puts on and you're talking to him, he makes you feel he has all the time in the world to talk to you and hear what you have to say. And he would also be comfortable taking risks. He was a long-term Nike athlete, and when he couldn't come to terms with Nike in 2018, he took a giant risk on a completely different company. He signs a 10-year apparel deal with Uniqlo. The agreement had been reported to pay Federer, that one agreement alone, had been reported to pay Federer over $30 million a year. In 2020, Forbes named him the world's highest paid athlete, estimating his annual income at over $100 million a year. That same year, only $6 million was from official prize money in tennis. And then he's also a very smart businessman. Because the Uniqlo agreement did not cover footwear, Federer also invested in On, which is a Swiss running shoe company that's based in Zurich. I actually just spent time with David, one of the founders of On. I spent a few days with him. I found him wildly impressive. So back to this deal. So he signs this deal. He's like, okay, Uniqlo is just clothing. Let's do a deal with a shoe company. Makes sense to do one with a Swiss running shoe company. When On goes public, Federer's stake in the company was worth about $300 million. And so think about how crazy that is. This is why all of these ideas that you and I have been talking about all relate to each other. They all work together. Combined, they are much more valuable. The fact that he optimized for the long game, the long run from day one. Not only did he have a remarkable tennis career, but it benefited him in business. His biggest win in business came 23 years after he turned pro. Federer endured when so many of his peers had already retired. Of the 128 men who played singles at the 1999 French Open, which was his debut Grand Slam tournament, he was the last one still playing on tour. And I think this quote from Federer explains why. I never fell out of love with the sport. Never.